Welcome back to Getting Beyond How Are You? Learning to Connect in a Disconnected World. I want to thank you for returning to our series. Whether you're viewing alone or with a group, there's going to be some great examples shared today for ways we can get to know our colleagues, acquaintances, and our friends better. If you're viewing with a group, you'll be able to practice the activities that you observe on the video. Just simply pause the video after each example conversation and do the same thing in your group. Our session today, questions that get beyond the obvious, deeper questions, really builds on what was begun last session, where we discovered the value of asking good questions. And we begin this topic of discussion, one of the building blocks of relationships and communications, which is small talk. You hear a lot of it, and not just from middle school kids either. Laughter is usually involved, and that's because small talk is an entertaining, non-threatening form of communication. Sometimes, though, it requires a little bit of skill. So, what is small talk? This is what Google has to say. A light, informal type of conversation used mainly for social bonding rather than exchanging significant information. Serves as a social lubricant to build rapport, establish safety, and break the ice between strangers or acquaintances. Why do we use small talk? Well, there's a lot of reasons, and here are some of the most popular ones. To be friendly and approachable, to acknowledge or ascribe worth to someone, to check in with a friend, to fit in and give no offense, to continue a conversation, sometimes to avoid deeper topics that someone might not wish to discuss, and to fill silence, break the ice, or to alleviate awkwardness. Using small talk sometimes requires a little bit of skill, a certain amount of verbal repartee. Some people are witty or really good at jokes and puns. That would be my brother and my husband. Um, these things are often a hallmark of small talk, but not everyone is good with small talk. Have you ever observed or been a part of a small group conversation where one individual is obviously really good at small talk and tends to commandeer the entire conversation, leaving others who are not as well versed with small talk shut out from participation in the group and of any meaningful conversation? It's actually a painful thing to observe or to experience firsthand, particularly within the church or a business or social setting where attendance is required. Does that mean then that there's no room for small talk in these kinds of settings? Of course not. A certain amount of small talk is necessary. But wouldn't it be tragic, though, to live your whole life only to realize it's been filled primarily with meaningless chatter, which is another word for small talk? So, how does a person get around this problem of overdosing on small talk? I think a starting point would be to begin recognizing meaningless chatter when you hear it. We need strategies too to counter meaningless small talk and gently steer the conversation into more meaningful content. And that's where questions come in because they can redirect any conversation. One way to segue from small talk to more targeted conversation is to learn the simple skill of asking good questions. Relationships, whether they are in the church, the family, at our work, in our neighborhoods, among friends, they deepen when we ask one another questions that get beyond the obvious. So, what makes a good question? First of all, if you expect to learn something significant about the person with whom you're talking, then one important thing you have to remember is try to phrase your question so the listener will have to respond with more than yes or no or one-word answers. Instead of asking, for example, did you have a good weekend? Which the answer is usually either yes or no. Ask, what was a highlight of your weekend? You see, the do or did questions only produce yes or no responses, while the WH question words called information questions because the response most always guarantees information of more than a single word. Here's a question and answer exchange between the two authors. Our author Melissa asks, Dad, do you like sports? Her dad, the author David, answers, Yes, I'm not a super athlete, but I like sports. How was that question? Conversation didn't go very far, did it? This is an example of a question that needs to be strengthened so it can go beyond the obvious question, which usually just results in a yes or no answer or very limited response with very little information. So, a better question would be one that prompts a longer and more in-depth response. So, here's another example of a question and answer exchange, but with a better leading question. Melissa asks a better question. Dad, if you could have free tickets to any event in the city, what would you choose to see and why? Here's a summary of the main points of David's very lengthy response to that question. He first comments about basketball and how he once saw Michael Jordan play and he would like to see the Chicago Bulls again. Next, he reveals he'd played baritone in the high school band and that music was becoming a renewed interest of his. He remarked that he'd like to see the Chicago Symphony, particularly if they were playing the Symphony in D minor by César Franck, which was a composer he learned about while he was in high school. So David's daughter, Melissa, she's learned several things, including even some new things about her dad, including he likes sports. He loved seeing Michael Jordan play basketball. He played baritone in the school band. He would enjoy going to the Chicago Symphony, and he would like to hear César Franck, the composer that he learned about during his high school days. Here's some possible follow-up questions that could extend this conversation even further. What's a good thing that happened or a funny experience you had in the band? What else did you participate in during high school, and how has that played a role in who you are today? Or who influenced you during your high school years and how? So I'd like us to evaluate two questions. Is one question stronger or better than the other? Let's read question one. What does your husband do? And now question two. When you first met your husband, what did you envision him doing as a career someday? Now, I have to confess that this really was something of a trick question. I submit that both questions are good, depending on the setting. For example, let's imagine that there are two people, a couple, who you have met for the first time, maybe at church or in another social setting that you regularly attend. Which question would you ask and why? Well, I would ask the first one, probably because I have just met the couple, and the first question is more like small talk, which would be an expected question in the initial meeting situation. Now, the first one is just establishing factual information that anyone can know. Now, in what kind of setting would you ask the second question? Personally, I would ask that in a setting where maybe I had known the wife longer and had established a little more of a rapport with her to ask the second question. You see, the second one is asking her to go deeper and to reveal more of herself, her thoughts, her opinions, her feelings, which might not have been appropriate for an initial first meeting. So we're going to listen to Melissa's response when her father David asked her the second question about her husband Doug. That question was, when you first met your husband, what did you envision him doing one day?
When you first met your husband, what did you envision him doing as a career choice?
Oh, actually, no one's ever asked me that before. So when I first met Doug, he was a goalie on our college hockey team, and hockey was his life. He even had dreams of going on to the pros, and I thought that's what he would end up doing. But God led him in a different direction. Doug started getting involved in the theater department at school, and that's how we got to know each other. Our friendship helped him to get in touch with spiritual things. And so after we got married, God eventually led him to Asbury Seminary, where he became the assistant to the director of dramatic ministries. He's been able to use his theater training by leading a drama tour to various kinds of churches throughout the South. And Doug also works as a youth minister at a church in Lebanon, Kentucky.
Well, I have a feeling you could go on and on.
That's what happens when you ask a good question.
So what information did we learn about Melissa's husband, Doug, from this conversation? He was a goalie on the college hockey team. He wanted to play pro hockey. He got involved in the theater. Through the theater and Melissa's influence, Doug got in touch with spiritual things. He went to Asbury Seminary as an assistant dramatic ministries director, and he also was a youth minister at a church in Lebanon, Kentucky. How much more did we learn about David by asking this creative question rather than just, what does your husband do? So, what kind of follow-up questions would you ask based on that conversation? Here's some possibilities. What was his initial interest in theater? What was involved with being an assistant dramatic ministries director? In what ways has he incorporated drama into his youth work in the church job? Could you share a story that occurred during touring with the drama ministry? Maybe something inspiring or challenging, difficult, funny, or rewarding. In what ways, if any, did this story influence or encourage you in the future? Now, when you add the tag phrase "and why" onto a question, it allows a person to disclose more about himself or herself, thus turning an obvious question into a deeper question, a question that goes beyond the obvious. By asking "and why," a person shares details that they probably wouldn't have said otherwise. When you ask good questions, it helps you to get beyond the small talk that often keeps us from really getting to know one another. The value of a good question will communicate to friends, to neighbors, family members, or church members, you are important to me. I want to know what's happening in your life. Now, you might remember from the scripture when the prophet Samuel was looking for a man to replace Saul as the king. He almost overlooked David. In fact, David was out tending the sheep, and Samuel looked at all of David's older brothers first. Probably David's father thought one of his older brothers would be chosen. No doubt some of them were handsome or tall, may have had other physical characteristics that were commanding by the world's standard. Because if you recall, when Saul, the first king, was presented, it was his physical characteristics and appearance that the people noticed. He was described as handsome and as being a full head above everyone else. But in 1 Samuel 16:7, we read, "But the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his," meaning David's brothers, "do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." So we see that the Lord does not look at the things that man looks at. God looks at the heart. Since man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart, when we ask good questions, we are trying to uncover a person's heart. We want to know, what's this person really about? How can I get God's perspective on him or her? In order to discover a person's heart, one thing that we can do is to develop a sensitivity to people and to discern what they are really saying behind their words. As individuals develop their questioning skills, they will hopefully develop a reputation as one who really listens and can be trusted to keep confidential information. Now, here's a little side note. We all know people who go through difficult times, perhaps, for example, a spouse with a terminal illness. The common question we may ask is, how are you this week? However, I submit a better question might be, tell me, what was a struggle you faced this week? Or here's another example. You might say, I've been praying for your husband, but I'm also interested in how you are doing. Can you share a bit of what you are going through? Often you will find that people are quite willing to talk. They just need someone to open the conversation up if they get some kind of good lead. Now we are getting ready to practice what we learned, but first I want to see a couple of demonstration conversations. And afterwards, we're going to complete this activity, the interaction of 10 minutes. Watch the interviews first and then pause the interview or pause the video and do the interaction in your group if you're viewing with a group.
If you can go to any event or any place that you wanted to, where would you go?
One of the events that I would really like to be involved in is the Albuquerque Air Festival, Hot Air Balloon Festival
Oh, really?
in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I went there for a week of vacation. It wasn't at the time of the festival, but we did go for a hot air balloon ride. My lady friend and I traveled there. We went to museums every day. We went out and ate in local restaurants. We went to Santa Fe. We bought pottery. We were looking at all the portraits. But when we went at 5:30 in the morning, they picked us up at the hotel and drove us to the county park. And we asked for a private hot air balloon ride with just the two of us and the pilot. We didn't want to be thrown into the basket with 10 people, maybe hanging over or somebody gets sick. So we thought that would be the way we'd be willing to pay extra for that. So they did get that arranged at the hotel.
Oh, what was your favorite part?
Oh, everything. The pilot was going to be leaving Albuquerque, and his job was to travel with the new balloons that were ordered. Mostly it's companies that purchase them, and then he travels with the balloon to the corporate headquarters and trains any of the people that are going to be the pilots for the balloon.
Really?
So he always gets to travel to all different countries. He was going to be going to Russia after he left Albuquerque. Yes. But he let us sit in the basket. We eventually went up. He introduced us to his chasing crew. They were in a van, and so after he would lift the balloon up and we would sail across the Santa Fe, he would have his chasing crew try to determine where he was going to land, and then he let us out of the basket when he landed the balloon, and we got to help the chasing crew gather the billowing balloon and roll it up so we could get it back in the truck. And then we all went back to the park. It feels like you're going up an elevator.
Really?
Yes.
How high up did you go?
Well, I don't know how many feet, but it was by the time we were up and we were sailing over the Rio Grande, people were on the interstate going to work. So it was really cool. It was a little chilly because that's a high elevation. Even though everything's flat out there, it's a dry, cool.
Was it windy?
It was not. He kept his, they watched the weather very carefully, and he was going to call it if it was too windy for him to be able to take us for a ride. It was just an awesome experience. So I would love to go to the festival where they have balloons from all around the world, different shapes and sizes of the balloons.
So they fly in for that?
They get their equipment there. They have company suites on the side where they can have sponsors come in and view all the hot air balloons, and they have food vendors, and of course
Things for sale?
yeah. Yes, things to buy and purchase. So that's
Would you go up again?
oh, I would in a heartbeat.
You weren't scared?
No, I wasn't, but I didn't really know what to expect, but I'm not afraid of heights.
Yeah.
But I was willing to go. And the lady had just retired that I was traveling with. And she said, I wouldn't do this if you weren't going. And her name was Barb. So there's two Barbs again, and we're going up in this hot air balloon.
So was it rocky or?
It really wasn't. I mean, I think it all depends on the pilot and how much,
How much experience?
experience he has.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word.
That is so interesting that they come from all over the country for this festival. Sort of like the 12 Hours of Sebring. They come from all over the world. It just blows my mind.
I know.
Wow. If you can go,
And Louise, if you could go on a trip, on a journey, where would you like to go?
would absolutely love to go to Israel. I've talked to so many people that have been, and they've talked about how absolutely life changing it is. And I can imagine, because when you think about just walking where Jesus walked and seeing where he called the disciples and seeing the Mount of Olives and seeing the shore where he taught, and just, I think that it would just be indescribable. And I really, honestly, until recently, it's never really been a real desire. But I've done some Bible studies. We've done some Bible studies with Christy McClellan, and she goes over there and teaches from there. And it just made me hunger just to go over there and just get more. And I just have been so thankful to be able to see and hear and just understand how just being where he was is just electrifying.
I know. Some of the underground areas of some of the churches over there, the Wailing Wall, there's a lot of locations that I'd like to visit too. Are you afraid or concerned about travel?
At this point,
Safety?
yes, at this point, with all of the uncertainty that's going on in the world, I have no desire to go anywhere internationally. In fact, there are places in the United States I'm not too keen on going to right now. But I don't know if that'll ever be safe enough to open back up. But at this point, no. But I just think about being where people were when they were ministering and sharing the gospel and the things that were going on, and just the markets and the different things, and just being able to just breathe the air and just touch the water. I mean, it just seems like it would make the Bible come alive.
Yes, it would. Would you go on tours, or would you want to travel on your own?
I think I would go on a tour.
Yeah, I would too.
Because I'm not comfortable enough to travel on my own, unless I went with family or friends.
Right.
But I definitely a tour guide, because you don't want to go somewhere that's really not a good place to be.
Right.
Because every place you go, there's a no man's land, and you got to know the area so you don't walk into there. So that would be a concern for me. But just the museums, I can't imagine what would be in their museums.
That's true. I never think about that. The Hebrew scrolls and everything that we've seen in some of the local synagogues. I remember visiting one as a child for Vacation Bible School, and it was a field trip, and I was just in awe.
Well, the Dead Sea Scrolls, I mean, they were on tour in the United States. I never saw them. I wish I had made the effort now, but just to be able to see some things, and just when people are doubting what you tell them about the Bible, say, well, I have seen some things in museums that literally back up what happened in that period of time. Would love to be able to do that. I mean, you can do it in book form and just, look at pictures and so forth, but seeing it is basically makes you a witness.
That's right.
And so that would be one thing, but just, and also I would like to interview Jewish people and just see, what do you believe about Jesus? What do you believe about the life of Jesus? I would just like to know their perspective on who he is, and do they still practice all of the customs and all of the festivals and all of the laws, or are they messianic and they truly believe that the only way to heaven is through Jesus Christ? I'd be so interested to have conversations with them, just to see they're living on the land, just to see, do they minimize it?
Right.
I mean, is it just everyday life and it's just not a big deal for you? Or do you just every morning wake up and think, wow, this is where Jesus was? And it just kind of makes your day different.
Right.
Okay, so now we've seen 2 interviews, And we're going to have an opportunity to practice what we've learned. That is, if you're viewing with a group. So the question that you're going to ask each other is, if you could attend any event or go any place, what would the event or place be and why? So here's in the instructions. Each person will take a partner. Ask your partner if you could attend any event or go any place, what would be the event or place and why? You'll notice the star, and there are two alternate questions at the bottom. The first alternate question is, who influenced you during your high school or college years and how? And the second is, when you first met your spouse, what did you envision him or her doing for a career? So you have a choice of 3 different questions you might ask. As you ask the questions, take note of your partner's comments. You're going to spend 5 minutes. Then after 5 minutes, you will reverse roles and your partner will then ask you a question and they will take notes about your responses. After everyone has completed, then you're going to regroup with a larger group or your table, wherever you're working. The original partners then present their partner's story to the large group using the summary in 1 minute. Okay, 1 minute. Use the notes if needed. Listeners that were not part of the original conversation, they will take notes so you can formulate further questions of anyone whose story interested you after all of the summaries are given. And each listener asks a follow-up question to a person of their choice. So now we've reached the end, and we want to have a little assignment during the week. And there's 3 things I want you to change the question to get a better response. How is school or work? How can you rephrase that to get more of a response other than just fine or not good? Secondly, is your family okay? Ask a question that would give more of a response. And third, are you doing all right? So go ahead, take out your cell phone and photograph your assignment for next week. And if you are viewing with a group, you can share your responses with the group in the next session. So until next week, bye for now.